It's very lovely to be with you, I think for the first time in this role in person, and it's nice to be back in the chamber with Senator Lewis. I want to echo his genuine gratitude for the work that you all are doing and the service and leadership that you have demonstrated during such a challenging time. I speak both as someone who has worked professionally in education for almost my entire career and also as a district parent. I am every day aware of what a tremendous effort it takes at each school, and I'm grateful that you all are working on behalf of our educators and our students. Like the Senator, I'll go over just a few legislative updates and also share a bit about one of the priority bills that I'm so thrilled has a good amount of momentum, and I'm also happy to speak briefly about the mascot conversation that is happening in the city. So in addition to the really exciting news about the full implementation of year 2 of 6 of the Student Opportunity Act, and I want to thank the Senator for his leadership on that bill as Education Committee Chair. I was working in the executive branch at the time and was really grateful also to have a small part to play in that, but it's really a great credit to him and the legislative colleagues who got that to the finish line. The Senator also mentioned just on Saturday, Governor Baker signed into law a $101 million spending bill, which largely goes to providing mitigation strategies and efforts in our continued COVID-19 recovery effort. So that would include significant funding for high-quality masks in our schools at $25 million, another $50 million for testing at K-12 schools with $5 million targeted to increase youth vaccination rates. I'm very grateful and was glad to support this bill in the House and its real attention on our K-12 school settings as well as our early education settings. You all also are probably familiar with the $4 billion COVID-19 recovery law that the governor signed in December. This was, sort of a once-in-a-lifetime level of investment drawing from our ARPA dollars that are at the state level, as well as state surplus funding. And I was really honored to take the floor of the House for my inaugural address to raise up the $10 million of investment that I secured for special education students who turned 22 during the pandemic, many of whom were unable to access some of their special education services because of safety concerns. And I'm really grateful for the superintendent and her leadership team for meeting with me to talk about that issue, and grateful that it was in the final legislation. That legislation also included an earmark for Melrose that the Senator and I secured for the high school elevators of $150,000 to assist with some upgrades that are very important for accessibility. And to the Senator's point, we always welcome your feedback on needs that you may have as we prepare for this fiscal year 23 budget process as well. I'm really excited to hear about a lot of the really good legislation that the Education Committee has reported out favorably. And one bill that the Senator referenced is H127, the Student and Educator Data Privacy Act. This is a bill that I filed at the beginning of last session, drawing on my experience as an education attorney for over a decade working in the space of federal regulations, FERPA, this Federal Student Privacy Act, and also monitoring states that were updating their own state laws around data privacy. So when I was a 7th grade teacher, all of my students' records were stored in a manila envelope in a file cabinet. As a parent, and as all parents these days know, most of our students are creating a massive data footprint on a daily basis, really. And so our state laws have not been updated during this digitalization of data, and now we're really in the minority. 45 states over the last decade have updated their state laws, and so I filed this bill with a colleague who was chair of the Higher Education Committee last session, and we're so thrilled to have the Senator's support as well as House Chair Peisch, and I'm really hopeful that we'll get it to the finish line this year, and happy to be in touch with any of you if you'd like to add support or have questions about that. Essentially, within the law, it will update our definitions to acknowledge digitalization of data, define third-party operators who are receiving student data for K-12 purposes. It will codify in law guardrails around how those providers can use our students' data to appropriately support educators in the classroom, while prohibiting certain activities like targeted advertising or creating a student profile that will retain in perpetuity, requiring return of all data or destruction of it when it's no longer necessary for the purposes of the contract. The bill would also have DESE establish a position to support district implementation of these requirements with a chief privacy officer and regulations and technical assistance and guidance to ensure that there's a level of consistency and just add leverage to your negotiations with third-party vendors when you're looking to provide the most robust learning environment for our students. And finally, it would ask that all districts as well identify someone who would be responsible for keeping an eye on privacy and ensuring that educators are mindful of these decision points as they look for creative content to provide to their students, and also allow families to collaborate by knowing more about the types of third-party vendors with which a district is contracting. Happy to be in touch again about any of that. I'd also like to just note, thinking about a few of the things that Senator Lewis mentioned, the issue of early education care is also deeply important to me. As you know, I have a 3-year-old and have been involved and supported a lot of the work of the Department of Early Education and Care in my previous professional role. And so I had a really robust community conversation that you can find on YouTube with a panel of early education experts, including a former EEC commissioner, talking about the growing momentum at both the federal and state level on this issue, and really thrilled that the legislature saw fit to establish this special task force to study these issues. You also may know that I've done some podcasts, and I've been pleased to see here Ruby and Morgan, who were two of my guests on a recent podcast series to hear more about the high school student experience during COVID, and also recently was able to meet with Carrie Berman, Assistant Superintendent for Pupil Personnel Services, and the Administrator for Counseling and Student Services for grades 6 through 12, Lindsay Dobbins, to talk about all the leadership of the schools and social emotional learning. That'll be coming out soon. It was a great collaborative conversation with counterparts in the Malden Public Schools, and such important work in both districts happening. Additionally, you all may be aware that we're still working with DCR on the intersection at Melrose and Lynn Fells Parkway. So I was really grateful to be working hand in hand with the mayor and the senator to get DCR last year to put together several, I think 2 virtual community conversations where they took feedback in the first conversation about the concerns that so many residents and families and students have about accessing the middle school and the high school. They took that feedback, they did their own engineering analysis, and then in May, we met again virtually, and they presented 4 conceptual options for us and heard feedback again. Well, we're already now in February, and so over the course of that interim, both of us have reached out, our offices have reached out to inquire about the status, and then the mayor sent a very good letter this month, again asking it now at this point, the newest acting commissioner for an update, and we do have confirmation that they are meeting Monday, February 28th with the Crystal Street residents who asked for a separate meeting because some of them were unaware of these very well-noticed public meetings. And so to DCR's credit, they're trying to include them, and there's nothing new that will be presented. It'll be the same 4 concepts that we all heard about in May. And I'm certain that thereafter with City Hall, with you all, with the senator, we'll try to keep a lot of pressure on DCR to move forward, because I know how important it is for the safety of our city to really get that updated. Finally, on the mascot issue, I also want to commend Principal Merrill and this body for engaging in a very deliberative process, seeking public input multiple times through various modalities to consider a new mascot for the high school. I co-sponsored the bill that Senator Lewis referenced in the House, and it's now in the Senate, as he mentioned, an act prohibiting the use of Native American mascots by public schools in the Commonwealth. I was pleased that it received a favorable committee review in July of last year, and if it's passed, it will require the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education to issue regulations that ban public schools from using an athletic team name, mascot, or logo that names, refers to, represents, or is associated with Native Americans. That is very broad language. And I just think, that Melrose has an opportunity here to own this process proactively and to identify a new high school mascot that has no history of bigotry in the city. And so I would like to be on the record as well as supporting this process and the identification of a new mascot. So thank you.